Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephania Cox. Here are today's top stories. The National Guard deployment on January 6th was delayed for hours. New testimony sheds light on why. More than 100 illegal immigrants released into Texas have tested positive for the virus in the last week. And now they're heading to different parts of the country. Authorities say there's nothing they can do about it. Arizona's Attorney General argues his state's election laws should be upheld. He tells the Supreme Court that maintaining election integrity is the highest priority for public officials. An election reform bill is making its way to the House floor. Democrats and Republicans disagree on whether this bill will bring back voter confidence in our elections. And New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says he's not resigning, despite various allegations recently made against him. The House is voting on an act to make sweeping reforms to the election process. NTD's Christina Kim has more on what the act says.
The bill is called H.R. 1, or For the People Act of 2021. It's a massive 800-page bill proposing to make large changes to our elections. H.R. 1 passed in the House during the last Congress but met opposition in the Republican-controlled Senate. Now, with the Democrat-controlled House and Senate, proponents are looking to push this bill through. Democrats call this a pro-democracy, anti-corruption act.
H.R. 1 is bold, transformative legislation which fights voter suppression, promotes access to the ballot, cracks down on money in politics, and provides transparency to the American people.
But some Republicans are calling this the For the Politicians Act instead of the For the People Act. Former Vice President Mike Pence called the bill unconstitutional, reckless, and anti-democratic in his first op-ed since leaving office.
Is not designed to protect your vote. It's designed to put a thumb on the scale of every election in America and keep the swamp swampy.
So what exactly is in H.R. 1? Some of its proposals make it so you can't ask for voter ID in elections. It also allows people to register to vote and cast their ballots on the same day. It allows voters to vote outside of their precinct and prohibits witness signatures or notarization for absentee ballots. Proponents say expanding these measures gives the power back to the people because everyone is given equal access to vote. But legal fellow Zach Smith pushes back against the idea that this bill fights against voter suppression. For example, he says voter ID isn't suppression. It's already needed for almost every part of life.
I reject the idea that this is somehow designed to disenfranchise anyone or make it more difficult to vote, when really what a lot of these common sense election integrity measures are designed to do is to help restore the confidence that all of us can have in the electoral process.
He says this, quote, radical bill seems politically motivated.
Well, I think the measure is being pushed right now for political purposes. It seems like a political calculation.
Smith says H.R. 1 could be expected to pass in the House, but will likely run into problems in the Senate again. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Police found a live pipe bomb at an Iowa polling place Tuesday morning. Voters were casting ballots for a school district special election, but they were evacuated due to the bomb. Officers were called to the Lakeside Center just outside of Des Moines, Iowa at around 9:30 a.m. There they found a device resembling a pipe bomb in the grass. Police later confirmed the device was indeed a live pipe bomb. Officers then evacuated the building. The state fire marshal and FBI agents were called in. Technicians safely detonated the bomb, and voters were allowed back inside around 3 hours later. No one was injured. Polk County Auditor Jamie Fitzgerald said in a tweet that a couple walking their dog discovered the bomb. He said there's no way of knowing how long the device had been there and that officials don't know whether the bomb was related to the election. And police said an investigation into who left the bomb is ongoing. And Arizona's Attorney General made a case for why the Supreme Court should uphold the state's election laws. He said the laws ensure election integrity and hopes the rest of the country also works to reach that goal.
Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich urged the Supreme Court to affirm that his state's election laws are in line with the Voting Rights Act. Brnovich says the laws were designed to prevent things like out-of-precinct voting and ballot harvesting, which risk election fraud. The Democratic National Convention accuses the laws of being discriminatory towards minorities, but the top prosecutor has some tools in his legal arsenal.
I think those are all positive developments. So, I'm hoping and confident the U.S. Supreme Court's going to do the right thing.
One point the Attorney General makes is that the Biden administration sent a letter to a district court saying Arizona's election laws were consistent with the Voting Rights Act. There's also the Bipartisan Commission on Federal Election Reform, chaired by former President Carter, that found absentee ballots remain the largest source of potential voter fraud. Brnovich said ensuring election integrity is no longer a bipartisan issue.
It's unfortunate because everyone should have confidence in our elections. And I think as a public official, there is no higher priority than public officials than maintaining the public integrity of our elections.
Brnovich said the rule of law means defending laws the legislature passed. He said Arizona's state election laws are meant to ensure fair and orderly elections.
I think free and fair elections are the cornerstone of our system of government, and I'm going to do everything I can to protect the power or protect the integrity of our ballots.
Brnovich's oral arguments come days after an Arizona judge ruled in a separate case that state lawmakers have the right to access 2.1 million ballots cast in Maricopa County.
The Senate is trying to uncover internal issues that made the January 6th breach of the Capitol possible. The D.C. National Guard chief, the FBI, and Pentagon officials testified today. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more on the Senate hearing.
There was a 3-hour delay in sending the National Guard troops to the Capitol as the January 6th breach unfolded. The delay was partly due to the line of communication within the chain of command. At 1:30 p.m., then Capitol Police Chief pleaded on the phone to get help at the Capitol.
The approval for Chief Son's request would eventually come from the Acting Secretary of Defense and be relayed to me by Army senior leaders at 5:08 p.m., about 3 hours and 19 minutes later.
Washington, D.C.'s National Guard chief says that on January 5th, the Secretary of the Army sent a memo requiring that he submit a concept of operation before employing a quick reaction force. The chief says such a direction is unusual.
The Secretary of the Army's memorandum to me required that a concept of operation be submitted to him before the employment of a quick reaction force.
That means the Pentagon was ultimately responsible for deciding when to deploy the National Guard. Pentagon official Robert Seuss says the Defense Secretary spent time understanding what the Guard's mission would be before sending them. Seuss points out that then Defense Secretary Christopher Miller was walking on eggshells. That's because National Guard deployment during the summer riots was met with heavy scrutiny.
That then led in some way to this reaction where, well, we're going to be careful. We're going to be more careful. We're going to put some restraints on how we deploy the Guard that we previously haven't before. Have I got that correct?
You do, Senator. That's exactly what happened, Senator.
Okay.
And just to call into mind that we had a new secretary, too. Secretary Esper had left. Secretary Miller came in. He was aware of the events, and he wanted to make the decisions at his level.
Senator Josh Hawley says the use of the National Guard did become politicized over the summer. That's why it backfired on January 6th.
That there was a political reaction to events from over the summer, and that political reaction resulted in restraints being put on Guard deployment that ultimately ended up being dangerous on the day here on January the 6th.
And during the hearing, the Department of Homeland Security warned that there is another attack on the Capitol being planned for March 4th.
Here in the hearing.
We issued a bulletin last night, co-authored with the FBI, about extremists discussing March 4th and March 6th.
The National Guard is still deployed at the Capitol and ready to respond to the attempted breach if it does happen. Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
House Republicans are speaking out against Pelosi's pick to head a review of the Capitol breach. In a letter, Congress members questioned the nominee's inflammatory remarks about the U.S. Capitol Police and members of Congress. They're concerned his bias will undermine the accuracy of the assessment. The letter points to the nominee, retired Lieutenant General Russell Honore's accusation that Capitol Police helped rioters gain access to the Capitol because 40% of those Capitol Police support Trump. Honore also wrote a tweet calling for Senator Hawley to be run out of D.C. and disbarred for raising an objection to the electoral votes. Because of these comments, 17 House Republicans are asking Pelosi to share a list of candidates she considered for the position and an explanation of whether her office was aware of Honore's inflammatory statements. If she was aware, they ask if Pelosi or her staff directed Honore to remove the derogatory messages on his social media profiles. A whistleblower shows pictures of uncooked meat and metal shavings in meals served to National Guard troops stationed in Washington. The National Guard confirms soldiers got the uncooked food.
The whistleblower from the Michigan National Guard claims some guardsmen got sick. The Michigan National Guard sent out an announcement saying they're very concerned. It reads, "The first-hand accounts and pictures of undercooked food being served clearly shows that what is being given to Michigan service members is unacceptable." Some politicians expressed outrage. Michigan Senator Debbie Stabenow tweets that the situation is unacceptable. There is no excuse and she wants an immediate fix. Michigan Senator Gary Peters tweets that the situation is outrageous. He writes to the governor of Michigan and National Guard leaders. After several attempts to rectify the situation, I believe the only appropriate course of action is for the immediate cancellation of the existing food contract, the disbursement of per diem for the remaining duration of the mission. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Carver wrote to the Epoch Times. He notes that over 1 million meals have been served since the troops arrived in Washington. He says there have been no reported cases of troops getting sick from the food. He says inspections of vendors, meals, and facilities are comprehensive, and a very small percentage of meals have reported problems. The Michigan National Guard says the deployment is scheduled to end March 12th. Troops are planning to return home after that.
The National Guard will also assist U.S. Capitol Police to increase security for several days surrounding March 4th. That's a historic presidential inauguration date. Capitol Police are increasing measures ahead of time in case of protests. And the House Oversight and Reform Committee is reissuing a subpoena for Trump's financial records. The move follows a Supreme Court ruling that allowed Manhattan's district attorney to access Trump's tax records. The subpoena asks Trump to hand over 8 years of financial records. The return deadline is set for March 11th. The first subpoena against Trump's accounting firm Mazars USA was in April 2019, but that expired with the new Congress. Lawyers for the former president say the House wants to harass the president, expose personal matters, and act beyond its authority. The committee's chairwoman, Carolyn Maloney, says Trump's actions as president and his unwillingness to disclose his financial holdings show gaps and weaknesses in the law. They say this subpoena would help with reforms. And over 100 illegal immigrants in Texas have tested positive for the virus. Now free, they're heading to different parts of the country. This made possible by the newly revived catch and release policy and no requirement for negative tests. Here's the details.
It's been 1 month since President Biden rescinded President Trump's policy that stopped catch and release. Now migrants crossing the border illegally are being released into the U.S., and they're not being tested for the virus first. Instead, communities along the border are testing migrants themselves after their release. Felipe Romero, a spokesperson for Brownsville, Texas, told Fox News that 108 migrants tested positive for the virus since January 25th. That's around 6.3% of the total undocumented migrants tested in the border city's bus station. Romero told Fox that the city doesn't have the authority to stop migrants from traveling who test positive for the virus, although they are advised to quarantine and facilities can be provided. But a number of the illegal immigrants who tested positive at the station are hopping on buses to other parts of the U.S. Several of them told their plans to Noticias Telemundo Investiga, a Spanish-language network. Miram Izaguirre of Honduras told the outlet on March 2nd, "Right now, we were tested for COVID, and they separated about 8 of us because we were positive. We are waiting right now," she said as she was waiting to catch the bus to Houston. Some told the network that they were planning to go to New Jersey and Maryland. Eva Orellana told them that she's planning to go to North Carolina after she tested positive. She said, "On the way, we were wearing a mask all the time, gel, washing our hands." Biden's immigration policies have been coming under heavy scrutiny from both Republicans and Democrats.
So you want to talk about limiting travel to states like Florida because of COVID, and because of COVID numbers, yet you're not going to test any of these individuals coming across the border. They're in huge groups.
Democrat Representative Vicente Gonzalez says Biden's policies are sending a message to Central America.
I can assure you it won't be long before we have tens of thousands of people showing up to our border, and it'll be catastrophic.
On Tuesday, 13 people were killed in a car crash while trying to illegally cross California's southern border. 10 of them have been identified as Mexican citizens. In total, 44 people were trying to cross the border. 19 were crammed in a Chevrolet Suburban and 25 in a Ford Expedition. It's believed they were part of a human smuggling operation. Reporting by Grace Coulter, NTD News.
President Biden says he's okay with reducing the number of people eligible for the next round of stimulus payments. If you make over $80,000 a year, you're out. If you make under $75,000, you'll get the full $1,400 payment, and those in between will get smaller checks. The New York Post says Biden signed off on it to appease moderate Senate Democrats. And 2 Democrat aides apparently told Business Insider the $400 unemployment benefit would stay the same until the end of August. New York requires people to get tested for the virus before enjoying themselves at big venues. And they're taking it a step further, trying out something like a vaccine passport to get it in. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story and more on the pandemic.
They're calling it the Excelsior Pass, a digital application that shows if the user's tested negative or has been vaccinated. The state worked with IBM to make this app. Here's the state's director of budget.
So once we get the approvals, the app will be available for download on both platforms, on Google and Apple platforms, people to download to their smartphones. And that will allow someone to show the result of their test.
He says they'll officially roll this app out within a week. It's supposed to speed up the verification process, but people can show a paper receipt of their test results instead. A few questions come up. Will any business be able to use this app and maybe deny people service if they haven't been tested or vaccinated? And will the government at any point require proof of vaccination to enter venues? The governor's office didn't get back to us before the show. Now moving on to U.S. virus trends. CDC Director Dr. Walensky says they're seeing troubling signs. Their data says 7-day death and case averages have gone up. They're no longer falling. As of Monday, they've seen a 3.5% increase in the case average and a 2.2% increase in the death average. But new hospitalizations are going down, a nearly 12% decrease to that 7-day average. That curve hasn't leveled off. Now, here's an update on the South African variant. New York City's Health Commissioner, Dr. Dave Chokski, says they found 2 cases of the South African variant for the first time in the city. This variant and another one found in New York is believed to lower the effectiveness of vaccines. Dr. Anthony Fauci says injecting more vaccine into the body is one way to tackle them.
So instead of boosting up against the wild type, which gives you the cushion effect against variants that I mentioned just a few slides ago, the approach that has been taken by some companies, in this case Moderna, is to begin clinical trials of a booster shot against the specific variant in question.
And that's all for this virus update. Back to you, Steph.
Thanks, Miguel. And the White House says it is still assessing the impact of the rocket attack on the Iraqi airbase that houses U.S. troops. The Biden administration is working to determine who is responsible. They said they may take military action. NTD's Kevin Hogan brings us the update.
At around 7 a.m. local time on Wednesday morning, a barrage of rockets pummeled an Iraqi airbase, leading to the death of a U.S. contractor. Press Secretary Psaki said officials briefed Biden after the attack.
The president was briefed by his national security team this morning, was, of course, monitoring the details overnight.
The attack follows the U.S. strike on an Iran-aligned militia target at the Iraq-Syria border last week, which killed one militiaman. Psaki defended the strike, saying it was calculated, proportionate, and legal. Psaki responded to a question about what the administration plans to do about this new round of attacks.
What we won't do is make a hasty or ill-informed decision that further escalates the decision or plays into the hands of our adversaries.
The Pentagon said it can't attribute responsibility for the attack yet and is still assessing the extent of the damage. The White House said they reserve the option to take military action when and how they want to, if they think it's necessary. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
The Biden administration is announcing its foreign policy agenda. His Secretary of State has 8 priorities and singled out Communist China. NTD's Allison Lee has the latest.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken lists the Biden administration's foreign policy priorities. These are stopping the CCP virus, addressing the economic recession, promoting democracy abroad, creating a new immigration system, engaging with other countries, combating climate change, maintaining America's technological edge, and dealing with Communist China.
So here's our plan. First, we will stop COVID-19 and strengthen global health security.
Blinken singles out Communist China. He says the U.S.-China relationship is the biggest geopolitical test of the century. While Russia and Iran also pose challenges, Blinken says the communist regime is different.
China is the only country with the economic, diplomatic, military, and technological power to seriously challenge the stable and open international system. All the rules, values, and relationships that make the world work the way we want it to.
So what will the Biden administration do to address these challenges? Blinken says U.S.-China relations can be competitive, collaborative, and adversarial all at once.
Our relationship with China will be competitive when it should be, collaborative when it can be, and adversarial when it must be. The common denominator is the need to engage China from a position of strength.
On the issue of creating a more effective immigration system, Blinken's remarks have surprising resemblance with Trump's policies.
Strong borders are fundamental to our national security, and laws are the bedrock of our democracy.
Blinken wants to work with Central American countries to address the root cause of the migrant crisis. During the past 4 years, the Trump administration has forged cooperation agreements with Central American countries and stepped up engagement with Mexico to formulate the Remain in Mexico policy. Reporting by Allison Lee, NTD News.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is not resigning. He made the announcement today after leaders from both parties called for his resignation following sexual harassment scandals. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the story.
I'm not going to resign. I work for the people of the state of New York. They elected me, and I'm going to serve the people of the state of New York.
He added there's a lot happening at the moment, and he's trying to take care of it. But resignation isn't the only demand on him. Some Democratic leaders want to end Cuomo's special authority to order lockdowns and other COVID emergency powers. We asked New York City Council candidates why those calls are being made now and what Cuomo's temporary emergency powers have to do with the allegations of sexual harassment.
It's all political. You know, it's basically all political, and people are jockeying to position themselves. That's how I see it.
Others say some lawmakers wanted to take away those rights even before the scandals surfaced.
I heard discussion about time to move beyond the emergency powers earlier, actually, and I do think it's time to move beyond it.
State legislature was looking at the emergency powers for the last, I think, couple weeks when the nursing home scandal first emerged.
If Cuomo is stripped of these powers, local governments would have a bigger say in COVID restrictions. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
And state lawmakers are expected to vote on a bill to repeal the governor's special powers this week. And a group of New York City council candidates announced they're forming a common sense coalition. They say it stands for hope for the city's future. NTD's Dawn Tran has the details.
An alliance across city boroughs. Democratic candidates running for city council gathered in front of City Hall to make an announcement. They say they're forming a group called the Common Sense Coalition.
Our vision for the future is one of unity. Our coalition is a model on how to bridge the divide and come together to talk about issues that we are all facing in our communities.
The group's 7 candidates come from all boroughs in New York City, except Staten Island. They're focused on helping the city recover from the pandemic. One of the areas they're highlighting is education.
I want to run so that we can take away politics from education, so that we can fix our underperforming schools, so that we can make every student can learn and to pursue their American dreams as they deserve.
The Common Sense Coalition is also prioritizing small businesses and restaurants. Not only that, they aim to make New York City a place for new businesses. They say the way to do that is to improve the city's poor public safety.
Our city needs to be restored, and we need to promote and support our NYPD in the way in which we used to, in a common sense approach. Many times our elected officials are very afraid to come out and stand. They're like candles in the wind, blowing.
The coalition members said they're disturbed by the city's rising crime rates, adding they reject calls to defund the police. Tony Herbert, one of the candidates part of the Common Sense Coalition, said that if he does get into the city council, he will undo certain reforms made on the NYPD. A change that we could see him make is bringing back the anti-crimes unit, which he thinks was vital in bringing down the number of shooting incidents in the city. Don Tran, NTD News, New York.
As the recall effort grows in California, Governor Newsom spoke about the state's current vaccine efforts today. He linked vaccination to the ability to reopen the economy. NTD's Drew Van Vuhres was on the scene.
California Governor Gavin Newsom visited here at California State University Long Beach today, where he said they are opening a vaccine site for educators only in order to accelerate the reopening of schools.
We've designed a system that currently provides the ability to administer 2.7 million doses every single week. As I said last 7 days, 1.73. Our goal is to design a system that can deliver 4 million vaccines every single week. Again, the only constraint is manufacturer supply. At this point, that's really the issue.
The governor has visited many mass and mobile vaccination sites across the state recently, and he said he's going to focus on the equity of the distribution of the vaccine. During today's press conference, I asked the governor about the recall movement that's growing against him, and here's what he said.
Focused on vaccines, focusing on bringing down case rates, focused on safely reopening our economy. We're making tremendous progress. Focused on getting this school bill to my desk on Friday and getting our kids safely back into school. Focused on how we address the highest reserves in our state's history and balance short-term and long-term fiscal health in our economy that's enjoying one of the biggest surpluses in our state's history. We address the issue of homelessness, issues of affordability and housing. That's my response.
According to the governor, the state has administered 9.3 million vaccines and 20% of the state's population has received it. Reporting by Drew Van Vuhres, NTD News, Los Angeles.
A Bay Area store owner can rest easy tonight knowing he will not be charged for any crime after he fired a gun outside his store to defend a victim. NTD's Eileen Ang has more.
Alameda County's district attorney announced she won't file charges against Aaron Yee, the Oakland Chinatown shop owner who fired shots after witnessing suspects trying to rob a woman. The DA, Nancy O'Malley, said her office does not condone vigilantism. But after reviewing the incident, the DA concluded that Yee's actions are allowed under California's law of self-defense and defense of others. On February 15th, multiple suspects demanded a woman's camera, which was hanging around her neck. When she refused, one of them pushed her to the ground to take it by force. Yee heard her screams and fired his gun, scaring the thieves back into their car and away. One Bay Area resident views the result as a good thing, saying Yee didn't break any rules and did what a gun owner is responsible to do.
When we are in need, there's nobody to help us. The crime can happen within 30 seconds and everything is gone, is done. And the Second Amendment gives us the right to bear arms and protect ourselves.
Yee was arrested on scene but released shortly after. He has a permit to carry a concealed weapon. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
This is such a gentle painting, so beautifully portrayed.
A group of people reading together in this simple, everyday-looking living room. A young girl reading along with an adult, a grandparent sitting in the lotus position, a businessman in his typical suit.
You see all those people, they look like they have quietly settled down there. And you as a viewer, it looks like you've just stepped in the door.
You can't see what it is they're reading, so you're a little bit curious and you're kind of invited to walk in.
This harmonious feeling is not by accident. It is the very subject of the work. The book they are reading is the main text of Falun Gong, which is an ancient Chinese spiritual discipline in the Buddhist tradition. At the core of Falun Gong are the values of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Unfortunately, the practice is banned in China, where the artist resides. Thousands have been killed for their faith. Golden energy blooms into the room as a result of their steadfast faith. The painting on the back wall reminds us of this work's title, Plum Blossoms in a Muddy World.
It's also a metaphor for the practitioners that are sitting in the room as plum blossoms.
They signify perseverance and hope that all brutal winters end and life is renewed once again.
The magical painting.
A controversial lab in Wuhan is studying a new virus, and this one could be even more deadly than the CCP virus. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more.
Wuhan's controversial Virology Institute is doing research on another virus, and this one could be even more deadly than the CCP or Chinese Communist Party virus. It's called the Ebener Lake virus. The new infection doesn't come from bats or seafood like the CCP virus is thought to. Instead, it's mainly transmitted through mosquitoes or ticks. The research paper was published in Frontiers in Microbiology magazine last month. To conduct the research, Wuhan's Virology Institute worked with two other Chinese institutions. One of them is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the Xinjiang region, the same area that the Uyghur ethnic minority calls home. This virus got its name from the area where it was first found, the Ebener Lake area in Xinjiang region. It was isolated from a certain type of mosquito there. This is the first time the Ebener Lake virus has been studied, though it had previously been found in nature. The Virology Institute study sheds light on how it functions. Scientists there discovered that mice are easily infected by the virus and died within 5 to 9 days of catching it. The new virus also caused problems almost everywhere in the body. The infected mice lost weight and showed mild symptoms of brain swelling. The virus also attacked the rodent's central nervous system, blood, liver, spleen, and other areas. The research triggered heated discussion among Chinese netizens. Someone from Wuhan commented, quote, "I beg the Wuhan Research Institute to move away. Another city, please kindly accept it. Seeing this report really scared the heck out of me." Another netizen urged other countries to get prepared, warning all countries should quickly develop vaccines. An elderly man in Hong Kong died 2 days after he received a Chinese-made CCP virus vaccine. The Hong Kong government reported this on Tuesday. The Hong Kong government started vaccination for priority groups, including people over 60, since last Friday. According to local media, the Apple Daily, the 63-year-old man had diabetes and received Chinese-made Sinovac vaccine on the first day. He then developed acute breathing difficulties and died 2 days later. According to media reports, Sinovac vaccine has a 50% effective rate, and suspected side effects are reported worldwide, including death. Hong Kong health officials issued a statement saying the man's death is still under investigation. They said, quote, "At the moment, the causal relationship with the vaccination could not be ascertained." The CCP's grip on scientists from outside China may be tighter than ever before. Early last year, Dr. Anthony Fauci's deputy was required to sign a confidentiality agreement tailored to China's terms. He signed it so that he could join a World Health Organization or WHO team in China. The team was there to collect data about the CCP virus. Dr. Fauci is the chief medical advisor to the U.S. president and also the director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. According to an email from last February, a WHO officer informed Fauci's deputy, Cliff Lane, that he would have to sign a confidentiality form approved by Chinese authorities. The WHO officer wrote, quote, "The forms this time are tailored to China's terms, so we cannot use the ones from before." Lane was also asked to complete a disclosure of interest form. The Daily Caller News Foundation obtained the email through a lawsuit filed by a watchdog group called Judicial Watch. Judicial Watch's president said in a statement, "These new emails show WHO and Fauci's special accommodations to Chinese Communist efforts to control information about COVID-19. It is not clear what restrictions Beijing included in the confidentiality form. The Chinese Communist regime has maintained a tight grip on both Chinese and foreign scientists studying the virus. CCP officials have been accused of silencing doctors, whistleblowers, and journalists who tried to alert the public in the early stage of the pandemic. Beijing delayed a WHO visit to Wuhan last month, aimed at investigating the origins of the virus. The CCP also refused to turn over raw data on early virus patients in Wuhan.
China is canceling pineapples. The fruit is at the center of the latest China-Taiwan dispute. After an abrupt import ban by China, Taiwan is calling on allies to rally behind the hashtag #FreedomPineapple.
U.S. and Canadian diplomats praised the taste of pineapples grown in Taiwan Tuesday. It comes after Beijing banned pineapple imports from Taiwan last week, saying they could have harmful creatures on them. But Taiwan says the ban is a political move to put pressure on the island.
We want China to know that political pressure could not damage pineapples, neither could it reduce pineapple sweetness.
China accounts for 90% of Taiwan's pineapple exports. To address the surplus, Taiwan's foreign minister is calling on the world to rally behind the hashtag #FreedomPineapple. The de facto U.S. embassy in Taiwan asked, "Have you bought your pineapples yet?" "We have." And it posted pictures of pineapples with the hashtags Real Friends, Real Progress, and Pineapple Solidarity. And the director of Canada's trade office posted a picture of his breakfast with the hashtag #FreedomPineapple. In recent months, China has repeatedly sent fighter jets into Taiwan airspace as a message. Beijing still considers Taiwan a part of China. The Chinese regime has a record of using agricultural imports to achieve its policy goals. For example, to retaliate against Australia's hard stance on Beijing, China put a 200% tariff on Australian wine last November. One Hudson Institute fellow tweets, "Nothing pairs nicely with an Australian wine like a Taiwanese pineapple cake. Tastes like freedom." And a Japanese YouTuber made a creative video promoting Taiwan's pineapples. According to Taiwan authorities, more than 41,000 tons of pineapples have been sold since China's ban last Friday. That's about the same amount exported to China last year, and exports to Japan have reached a record high. Reporting by Lin Lin, NTD News.
Coming up, will small business owners force their employees to get vaccinated? We have some new data and analysis.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Have you ever wanted to buy something and then found ads for it everywhere you go online? That might change soon. Google said today it won't build new tools to track users around the internet. That's after it phases out the use of cookies from its Chrome browser. But not all cookies are sweet. Some are small pieces of data that are used to keep track of your activity online. Still, there are concerns about the tech giant's dominant power in online advertising, and the change won't affect Google's largest advertising moneymakers, Search and YouTube. And Google can still track users through its own services like Search or Maps. And Parler is dropping one lawsuit against Amazon Web Services, but is filing another. It was kicked off AWS in January after Amazon accused it of facilitating violent speech. That was around the time of the U.S. Capitol riot. The services were then restored in February. The latest lawsuit accuses Amazon Web Services of deceptive, defamatory, anti-competitive, and bad faith conduct. It alleges AWS violated Washington state laws on competition and consumer protection. A spokesperson for Amazon says the new lawsuit is meritless. Longtime Fox 10 News anchor Kari Lake is speaking out about why viewers won't be seeing her back on the air. Lake says she felt she was contributing to division by reading news that wasn't fully truthful. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
It's been a serious struggle for me, and I no longer want to do this job anymore.
Governor Doug Ducey. After nearly 30 years in the news business, Fox 10 anchor Kari Lake has decided to step down. The Emmy Award-winning anchor, who is a household name in Phoenix, posted this video on Monday explaining her decision.
Sadly, journalism has changed a lot since I first stepped into a newsroom, and I'll be honest, I don't like the direction it's going.
She says the media needs more balanced coverage and a wider range of viewpoints in every newsroom, level, and position. But Lake said over the past few years, she hasn't felt proud to be a member of the media.
I found myself reading news copy that I didn't believe was fully truthful or only told part of the story. And I began to feel that I was contributing to the fear and division in this country by continuing on in this profession.
This ultimately leading her to resign, and she's not the only one. In recent times, a number of people in the news industry have left their jobs, citing similar reasons, like Barry Weiss, who was a columnist for the New York Times. She left last year citing intolerance toward different viewpoints in the workplace and among editors. In her resignation letter to The Times, Weiss wrote, "If a person's ideology is in keeping with the new orthodoxy, they and their work remain unscrutinized. Everyone else lives in fear of the digital Thunderdome." Lake expressed how hard it is to walk away from your job. She says there will probably be hit pieces written about her, but that her faith guides her and gives her hope.
It is scary walking away from a good job and a successful career, especially in difficult times. I know God has my back and will guide me to work that aligns with my values.
Lake says she knows that many of her viewers are also waking up to what's happening in the news industry. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
People are flocking to buy Dr. Seuss books after it was announced 6 of his books would stop being published. Countless Dr. Seuss favorites like Cat in the Hat, Green Eggs and Ham, and Horton Hears a Who soared to the top of Amazon's bestsellers list, securing 9 of the 10 top sellers, dominating the rest of the charts. And the 6 banned books are also in demand. One bundle is selling on eBay for nearly $3,000, with at least 5 bids so far. This shows Dr. Seuss remains popular, maybe even more so after the ban. This year, his books earned an estimated $33 million before taxes, and Forbes listed the author as number 2 on its highest paid deceased celebrities of 2020. One big question for small businesses is whether to force employees to get COVID tests or vaccines before returning to work. Well, a new survey says most small businesses aren't making employees get either. NTD's Tom Ojimek reports.
Most of America's small businesses are not forcing their employees to get tested for COVID-19 or get the vaccine. The findings come from a government survey of around 25,000 small businesses. It found that 70% of businesses nationwide did not require a negative COVID-19 test before letting their employees resume in-person work. 10% of businesses said they did, while nearly 20% said the question didn't apply to them because they didn't have employees physically coming into work between February 15th and 21st, the week covered by the survey. On COVID vaccines, 78.4% of small businesses nationwide said they did not require their employees to get it, while just 2.2% said they did. But there were differences across sectors. Healthcare was by far the biggest requiring a vaccine, with 4.9% checking that box. That's more than twice the national average. Healthcare also led the field in testing requirements at 15.5%, followed by construction at 11.7%. The survey comes as the vaccination drive is picking up speed, and states eager to reopen for business are easing COVID restrictions. Johnson & Johnson's newly authorized vaccine started shipping over the weekend, while Massachusetts joined states like Iowa and Missouri to make it easier to grab a dinner and a show. Tom Ozimek, NTD News.
The pandemic has reshaped the global travel landscape, and low-cost airlines are taking advantage. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Major airlines are shrinking to contain costs, but budget carriers Spirit Airlines, Allegiant Travel, and privately owned Frontier Airlines are starting to recruit pilots again and are expanding their networks. The three airlines' combined U.S. market share barely topped 10% before the pandemic. According to UK-based consultancy Midas Aviation, that could grow to 20% this year alone.
Look, the budget airlines help democratize travel. They bring low-fare air transportation both to small towns and large cities. In some cases, they may provide some of the only air transportation some communities see.
Las Vegas-based Allegiant has recalled all of its furloughed pilots and has plans for growth. Spirit and Frontier have posted pilot job ads and are taking in Airbus A320neo jets that could help open longer routes. That's including coast-to-coast flying, traditionally controlled by legacy carriers. In contrast, American Airlines has gone from hiring 100 pilots a month before the pandemic to threatening 1,800 furloughs without fresh government assistance on labor costs. Ultra-low-cost carriers, or ULCCs, offer a bare-bones experience at rock-bottom fares and charge heavily for extras like bags.
The budget airlines charge low fares because they've stripped away costs, they pack a lot of seats on their planes, and they make the money back by charging you for everything from a bottle of water on the plane to bringing a bag or checking a bag, and everything in between.
ULCCs are common in the European market, but have struggled to compete in the United States. There are tier-below carriers like Southwest Airlines, which pioneered the low-cost concept in the 1970s, but since then has grown to become the leading domestic airline. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Coming up, an explosion at a virus testing center north of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Police say it's an attack. And a British lord tells us what he's doing to tackle forced organ harvesting in China. Find out more in just a minute. A blast striking a COVID-19 test center north of Amsterdam in the Netherlands before sunrise. Police find an explosive device and say it's an attack.
Thankfully, no one was hurt by the blast at the test centre 35 miles from the capital city. Police recovered a metal cylinder involved in the explosion. A police spokesman says the cylinder must have been placed there, and something like that doesn't just happen by accident. The head of the Public Health Service called for the swift arrest of the perpetrator.
An explosive was thrown and some windows are broken, and there's damage to the building. That is, of course, terrible.
Anger at healthcare authorities has increased since the start of this year. The head of the National Institute for Health now has a security detail for protection. Another test location was burned down during several days of rioting in January over Netherlands' nighttime curfew. The Netherlands will have national elections in 2 weeks that are widely seen as a referendum on the government's handling of the pandemic.
Lord Philip Hunt is one of the most proactive peers to tackle forced organ harvesting in China. We spoke to him about what he's done so far and his next moves on the issue. NTD's Earl Rhodes has the story.
Lord Hunt says he wants to prevent forced organ harvesting in China. He introduced an amendment for a medicine bill that will allow the government to demand proof of consent for tissues obtained from overseas. As the first of its kind, it passed in January.
It's a small step, but it's an important step, both in the UK and internationally, to make clear that the use of enforced organ donations is totally abhorrent, and we want to see it stopped.
Last year, the London-based China Tribunal concluded beyond a reasonable doubt that state-sanctioned forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience had taken place for years in China on a significant scale, and is still taking place. Lord Hunt says he has more on his shopping list.
My principal change would be to prevent organ tourism. We know people from the United Kingdom travel to China in order to have an organ donation, which they pay a lot of money for. I'd like to make it illegal for British people to do that.
Additionally, Lord Hunt wants to ban exhibitions of plastinated bodies, like real bodies, in the UK. Some human rights groups argue those likely come from prisoners of conscience. He also wants to prevent UK companies from being complicit by providing medical equipment like preservation devices. He admits there are economic risks and consequences involved in moving forward with such laws.
And if a country like the United Kingdom, that is not without influence in the world, takes this stand, I hope it will be a big influence on other countries as well. That's what we have to hope. In the end, we have to do the right thing.
He says the UK has a responsibility to take action. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
The dream of having a life on Spain's Costa del Sol has become more difficult for many British expats.
Many Brits are facing an uncertain future in post-Brexit Spain. British real estate agent Henny Illingworth has been living there for almost 4 years and says it's not a nice feeling.
Previously, as an EU citizen in Spain, I had the right to be here, and now I just have permission to stay. And it does feel a big difference, and it feels like there's been a huge amount of uncertainty.
She explains that Britons living in Spain are unable to come and go as they please unless they take up residency and healthcare is affected. Brits are selling their properties, and this has a knock-on effect on business. British citizens who are not registered Spanish residents can spend up to 3 months out of every 6 in Spain, the so-called 90 out of 180 days rule. CCP virus restrictions added to Brexit rules are causing a lot of uncertainty. Kirsty Ridyard has been teaching in Malaga since 2005 and is worried about the greater cost of teaching material from the UK, as well as difficulties with travel.
Personally, I just don't know what's going to happen with the transport. It used to be like hopping on a bus, getting on a plane to go to London and getting...
James Riley and his wife have been teachers in Malaga for 20 years and are concerned about their 13-year-old son's future.
Now, unfortunately, it seems to be that it's more difficult for him to go to British university, even though he's got a British passport and both his parents are Britain.
The people of Costa del Sol are looking forward to tourists returning after the pandemic. But now, fewer Brits may turn their holidays into a fully fledged lifestyle. Eddie Aiken, NTD News, London.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.